Welcome to another episode of Heated Conversations podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Also leave comment, share, and we go all the way east. We go to New York with Cornell University. We have head coach Melanie Hall on the podcast to talk about her program, to learn a little bit about her and things that drove her to be able to become the coach that she is today. She's been at Cornell assistant for a quarter century and been the head coach since 2021 of the program. Some other interesting things about her we'll discuss, including her Olympic lifting career, which I'm personally interested in and get to talk about that. Melanie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. As we were kind of talking off camera a little bit, how's your preseason going and how's the athletes doing? How are your coaches doing?
Preseason has been kind of up and down, but generically the girls are doing great. I think that we're in a really good place heading into season. So I feel like, even though we've had a few challenges early on, everybody's starting to get healthy again. We had a fantastic red versus white meet last Friday, which was posted on our Instagram page. So I think we're overall, all things considered, we're looking really good for where we are in the season.
Very good. Now, at this time, how many athletes do you currently have on your roster?
We have 27. Which I know for a lot of teams is kind of a large number, especially we only have two coaches, so that makes it a little trickier. But we feel really strongly that depth is incredibly important, and having a large team makes it much more of a community, and they're super supportive of each other. So I think that given all things are equal, we're in a really good place with the number of people we have on our team.
Very good. And do you guys have a lot of upperclassmen that kind of make that, or are you guys bottom heavy with your freshmen and sophomore?
Yeah, so we have 8 seniors, 7 juniors, and 6 freshmen and sophomores.
Oh, very cool. So it's 6 total. Oh, 6 of each?
6 of each. Yep.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Cool. We're going to tap back into the gymnastics a little bit. Just kind of want to talk about when we kind of start off talking about your team a little bit, just so that people can kind of know your roster size a little bit. Let's go back into your own personal gymnastics career. What kind of drove you into the sport of gymnastics, and how did it start for you? And then how did it lead to where you are now?
Wow. So I started when I was 3. My parents had me when they were young. They were still in the college setting. They both went to Florida State, which of course does not have a gymnastics team. So that was always a trick as I got older, because you don't want to go too far away from your roots, but not having a gymnastics team and then thinking about who does have a team that's somewhere near you. Being a Gator wasn't an option in my family. So, but anyway, so I grew up in my early years in Tallahassee. I started out at a gym where actually Ron Gallimore used to be one of the coaches. He was not my coach initially when I was 3, but so mommy and me class is kind of like everybody else. And then as we moved back down to South Florida, so I was in the Fort Lauderdale area. Tim Rand at one point was my coach. He, went on to do American Twisters. And then I was at a gym that is no longer there anymore, but International School of Gymnastics with John and Sue Lacurdo. And so, I think as a young kid, just being in an environment where there were a lot of other gyms and gymnasts in my area. And so that kind of fostered that love of gymnastics. Then we moved a little bit up to Georgia. I was at a gym where Doug McAvan was my coach. He was one of the former assistants at Georgia. And then I moved further north up to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I finished out high school and was at a gym there. So a lot of moving around, but exposed to a lot of different types of gyms and different coaching styles, different priorities. Yeah. So, way back when, you got to kind of rewind the tape. There weren't levels, there were classes. Okay. And so, moving up through that program through USAG was really important to me.
Yeah. Very good. And did you have a lot of mentors growing up? Like, were some of those coaches mentors to you in regards to shaping your mindset and also your desire to become a coach if you had those desires at those times?
I don't think I really ever thought I would be a coach. I mean, I in high school I did coach, little kid classes. I was the one teaching the mommy and me classes through high school. I taught some of the lower level kids at my gym, but I don't think that's kind of what I thought would be my career path.
Yeah.
I was an art major in college and kind of thought that that's where things would take me. But I graduated at a time where jobs were not plentiful, and I struggled. It was also a time where computers were just starting to be a thing in the art world. So computer graphics happened my second semester of my senior year. And so every job I applied for, they said, go back to school and learn computer graphics. And that wasn't really an option at the time. So I think, yes, those coaches definitely shaped me in my coaching role now, but not knowing at the time that that is something that I might want to pursue.
Yeah. And how's it going from Florida and living now in New York, where I'm sure the weather is different, the cultures are a little different? How was adapting to that?
Um, it's interesting because I think about that. I've now, you said I've been at Cornell a long time. Somehow it's been 30 years. I don't know exactly how that happened, but I've now officially lived here longer than anywhere else that I've been in the past. But I think, as you move further north, yes, the culture changes and whatnot, but I feel like it's the people who surround you
Yeah.
really shape who you are as a person. And I think I've always been very fortunate to be surrounded by some really quality people.
Yeah.
So yes, the climate is different. I still don't like winter. I don't think I'll ever love winter, but having just quality people in all of the different places that I've lived has really been key to shaping who I am as a person.
Yeah. And I've seen that you went to school in Radford. And where is Radford located?
Radford is in Southwest Virginia, so just kind of over the North Carolina border. It's about 2.5 hours from Charlotte, North Carolina. It's about 20 miles from Virginia Tech. So once upon a time, Virginia Tech was like the men's tech college, and Radford was the women's teaching college.
Okay.
Obviously, that has evolved, and both of those schools have changed significantly over the years. But so Radford at the time, I think I was there were maybe 6,000 students. And it has increased since then. I'm not sure what their enrollment is now, but it's more than that. And when I started there, we had a men's and a women's gymnastics. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
For the dog. We had a men's and a women's team, and they both were really active. So yeah, Radford is in the mountains of Virginia, and it's beautiful there. So it's funny because it's very similar landscape wise to Ithaca.
Okay. Very cool. Is in that having that landscape and scenery and stuff like that, going from there where I saw that's where you started your at least collegiate coaching career, and then kind of went to Cornell, and we'll talk about that transition. Did that make the transition to Ithaca a little bit smoother just because you spent your college time there, plus you also coached there for a couple seasons prior to getting the opportunity at Cornell?
So I think key to that part of the story is that my college coach was Paul Beckwith. And he's the reason I ended up in Ithaca at Cornell. So when I graduated from Radford in 92, he was there as the head coach of the women's program, and he also kind of oversaw the men's program at the same time. But Radford was in the midst of making some changes with he was also teaching there. So they were making some changes in their teaching staff and whatnot. And so Paul was looking for, another coaching job, and the Cornell job came open. And at the time, Cornell had dropped the program and it was reinstated, and the job came open and Paul became the head coach. And I had been out of school for a couple of years. Like I said, I was in Houston for a bit, and he called me up and he said, I'm looking for an assistant coach. And we had a long conversation, which finished with, it's in Ithaca, New York, and it's cold there. And I said, no, I understand. And so he was really the reason that I came here. I don't think when I, got here in 94 that 30 years later, I would still be here.
Yeah.
But the evolution of that has just been so seamless and so enjoyable. And I, just so many people don't love their jobs. And I truly love this job and where I am and the community here and the people, the team. So that transition wasn't as hard as I think it could have been.
That's good. And what about you? Did he see that he chose you to be the assistant coach, or to be able to follow him to Cornell or to Ithaca?
Wow. I don't know. You might have to ask Paul that question. Because I think at 24, I don't think anybody thinks that they're all that in a bag of chips as an assistant coach.
Yeah.
While I was at Radford, I had done, some coaching with the team there. I had an injury my freshman year. I fractured my back. And so I was out for a little bit. And so I kind of was working with people on floor and on beam. I'm definitely not the world's best choreographer, but I helped out with that. And, as you start working on things, you start to learn more about the things that you do and you don't like. And I had some background in spotting, from doing that in high school. And so, I think he was looking for somebody to help him with a program that had been struggling. And so we were kind of starting, I don't want to say at the bottom, because I don't want to take anything away from the girls who were on the team at that point in time. But, after having dropped a program and it being gone for a while, the people who are on the team were mostly high school level gymnasts. Some had been, level 10s, but for the most part, our team was a big mix of talent. And I hope that he brought me in to hopefully start the program here and just move it up.
Yeah.
So maybe I was just eager to get back into coaching. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's great, because I think it speaks volumes, obviously, that especially a coach that you're under, to want to have you be part of their, especially when they move somewhere else, and reinstating a program, and trying to rebuild and having the right personnel and right people around. And obviously, you stay there for a long time, so it was the right decision by him to make, to be able to do that. And I like to tap into those things too. I think the character part of people are important, especially when it comes to like head coaches and personnel, because no matter where you go, if the people that you're around, like you had mentioned earlier, community is good. If the people you're around don't make sense for you, then it really dictates the experience that you're going to have, right? And
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's cool to know that he's seen character in you, and it's obviously paid off for 30 years so far. Can you talk about your role as an assistant coach? Because I know you're an assistant coach for majority of the time that you were there, and then you became the associate head coach, and then now the head coach. Can you talk about all three phases and kind of what your roles were, and then how it came about to move up to each level?
Sure. So coming in, again, because the program was kind of just getting reinstated and we were kind of starting from ground zero, also going to a new school, even though Paul had obviously head coaching experience and whatnot, each school is very unique in what is required. I think one of the biggest challenges here at Cornell and at most schools, but specifically here, is the challenge of the education piece. And so coming into a team that needs a lot of attention in the gym, but also needs a lot of attention in the academic side of things. So figuring out sitting down with Paul and figuring out what does that look like from a coaching standpoint? How do we navigate that? So I think early on, because we were both new at the same time, we were learning together. And I think one of Paul's greatest assets is that he was a teacher in all aspects of everything. So it wasn't just, you're an assistant, here are your things that you're going to be doing, and I'll be over here as the head coach doing all of these things. We very much collaborated on pretty much every aspect of the team and how to navigate it. And I think that made future transitions a lot easier. So early on, mostly focusing on beam and floor for me. My favorite event is bars. But at 5'2", bars is harder to spot than for him, who's 6'2", a little bit easier, reach up to the high bar and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
We had definite roles in the gym, but we were always, there was always a crossover. And he never was like, well, I'm only the one who will spot these things and you will only do these things. If somebody, wanted him to come over and spot something on beam, but somebody wanted me to go stand over at vault, that was always a possibility. Budgeting stuff, recruiting, everything was a collaborative effort. And so, after years of being the assistant coach, and he felt that, it was time to move me up to associate head coach. And I think too, that was a kind of a new thing that wasn't, at least at Cornell, it wasn't something like, oh, you have a head coach and you have an associate head coach. But I think after all the years I had been there, he put in, to increase my title to that. And I think that it didn't really change our dynamic, personally or as colleagues, but it was more of a nod to the fact that I had been around for as long as I had and had been really, dedicated to the program.
Yeah. No, I love that. No, very good.
Yep.
And I know you had mentioned you love bars. I see that you were quite the bar worker at Radford, and you had held the record and until the and what were some of the skills that you like doing, and what are some of the skills now do you enjoy kind of either seeing on bars, or you kind of have respect for just because of the level of difficulty or just even the elegance of that skill?
Sure. So, obviously you got to rewind that tape again, go back to the 70s and 80s when the bars were really close together. And I distinctly remember, heck dismounts off the low bar, hated, just wrecked the whole front of your legs, wrapping around the bar, that never great. I loved when we started like moving the bars farther apart, and I learned giants, and but straddle backhand was probably it was the most fun skill for me. It wasn't the hardest skill, but it was definitely a lot of fun. I did I'm sure it has a name, an in-bar Jaeger. So with a forward grip, like you're going to do a straddle back, but you hold on, I can't even think of the name of it now, but anyway, that was in my routine. And then once the bars were further apart, I did a double flyaway as my dismount, but I loved working Comanche dismounts. I worked Comanche fulls for a while. I never got to compete them, but they were super fun to play around with. And then Schluterns, I don't know if you even know what that is, but it's like a basket, and then you go to a handstand on the low bar.
Okay.
Worked those for a while. And then, it's funny to think about some of the things that people used to do bar for mounts off a low bar, a half turn to handstand and off a board, like jump half turn to handstand. A lot of people used to do those. So worked those for a bit. I just like to play on bars. It was just fun.
Yeah.
So I think now probably one of my favorite skills is a Horkina. They're so beautiful when they're done well. I mean, there's so many skills out there that it's hard to pick one, but we've had a couple kids do a Horkina and they're just beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I'm with you on that. I enjoy bars. I'm fortunate to be able to, coach bars myself where I'm at, and have been for a little bit. But it's obviously one of those skills that, takes a lot of technical, prowess and also the right type of strength, but just the elegance of, flying through the air, right? Flying, especially with the bars now wider, and just seeing, the athletes and what they can do, the combinations that are being done. And, with ease, where, I just run across the floor right now and I feel tired, where these kids are just swinging and swinging and connecting and
Yep.
connecting. And, it's really cool to see. And it's really cool to see how the sport has evolved. And, in your time of coaching, I'm sure you've seen it evolve
A lot.
to, exponentially, which is very cool.
Yeah.
And let's tap into you a little bit, and we'll come back to talking about the program. I seen that you started Olympic weightlifting. How did you
Yeah.
get into that? And are
Oh,
you still kind of actively doing it?
I do not actively do Olympic weightlifting anymore. It was a lot of fun, a lot of work. I started it. My ex-husband was an Olympic weightlifter. And so we would, lift together, go to competitions together, whatnot. And there's a lot of correlation, especially with the snatch, which is one of the lifts that you do with bars. So I think for me, that was the easier of the two lifts. And then, the clean and jerk, the jerk part, if I could clean it, if I could get it off the ground and get it to my chest, the jerk part was easy. But there's just something about the clean. It's just always like getting under that bar, and especially as it got heavier. But there's a lot of correlation technique wise with Olympic lifting and gymnastics. So I think it kind of came easy to me initially. Clearly I had to work on the strength part. It took a while. But yeah, it was fun while I was doing it. Then a couple kids later and a whole lot more, time at work and whatnot just takes away from that training time. So
yeah, no, I understand it. I had an opportunity. I was a assistant coach at Utah State. I got there in September of 2016, and the program was big into the Olympic lifts. And so the strength and conditioning coach, his name was Brandon Howard, is Brandon Howard. He's no longer there. He's now at, I think, Texas Tech, I believe, or NC State. I think he's at NC State. And he kind of introduced me to it. And then the next season, I was at the University of Wisconsin Whitewater, and they had a club. And so whenever I wasn't working or coaching and I had opportunity to, I started Olympic lifting, and really I started competing and stuff like that. But it is quite technical, and I wasn't a gymnast, so I can't necessarily compare actively doing it, but I can see the correlations.
Yeah.
And those crashes on the bars, when it comes to if you dip too fast and the bars, because it's heavy, and you anticipate that you have to drop really fast and the bar's higher than you are, those clean crashes don't feel good, especially those snatch ones, right?
Yes. And you lose it behind you and your shoulder starts screaming at you, and
Yep. No, but I think it's great. Just like you said, I think if it was understood in the gymnastics world and how to teach it, it has a lot of correlations, and I think it will help with a lot of the shoulder strength, and also the development of the legs for their power development
I think what's hard with that is it is so technical, and it does take a lot of time. And I think the one thing with college athletes, and obviously it depends what school you're at and whether you have, a strength coach who's good enough to be able to teach it. We do have that, but because it takes so long, we don't do a lot of Olympic lifting, and it has nothing to do with whether they're capable. We've had several gymnasts who've graduated and gone on, and they're still competing Olympic lifting.
Oh, wow.
But it's just so technical. And so we just don't have the luxury of time to really teach the lifts properly. And because I did Olympic lifting I would never let my team do it unless it was done properly, because that's how you get injured.
Yeah.
And, lifting is supposed to enhance your gymnastics. And if you don't lift properly, it can just really hurt your gymnastics.
Yeah.
So we have a fantastic strength coach. She's super open to trying lots of different things, and we change it up. She's super excited about our team. I think generically gymnast strength to weight ratio is so much greater than most other athletes. And so she's always excited about, let's try this, let's do this. So she's been an amazing addition. She's been with us for 10 years, I think now. And she's fantastic. So I think, we're really lucky. And I do think it really improves their gymnastics.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. And I think some of the auxiliary lifts that you do, not necessarily auxiliary lifts, but exercises that you do, like your, I call them the I, T's, Y's, and then W's, kind of where you're doing the raises that really work the backside of the shoulder, which a lot of times in the delts and the lats, where I think that's where gymnasts struggle a lot of times, right? And to be quite honest, in gymnastics, a lot of things that we do and we train are more kind of front side, where we're causing flexion more than really hyperflexion, right? Or overextension. Well, we do overextension, but really a lot of stuff on bar seems, yeah,
sometimes.
But not necessarily for the shoulders, right? Where a lot of that stuff prepares your shoulders on the backside to kind of be healthy for those ranges, especially with the releases that you're going to do nowadays.
Absolutely.
If you're throwing those big releases, your low to highs, your tacachos, your single releases, the shoulders need to be able to be healthy back there. And not only the flexibility, which sometimes gymnast has, but the strength back there to be able to maintain, which, I personally start to introduce some of those things to my own club gymnasts, and I've seen a benefit, and seen longevity and more stability in their shoulders overall. And then they can control it. They know how to get in an overextended position and pull it back, because they have the muscles that can do it. Where, sometimes if you lose it overextended, you're done for, right? You come off the bar.
Shoulder out. Yeah. I think that's one thing that I'm sure Dave Tilley, right? I think he's been so instrumental in getting club gyms to start thinking about lifting. Not that they all have the ability to do it or choose to do it, but just even having that thought that, oh, wow, yes, gymnastics conditioning is great, but what more can we do so that these kids, when they get to these high level skills, are strong enough to handle the repetitions, handle the strength required to get through some of these skills. So I think it's awesome. And I love that, we've really moved towards the weightlifting and embracing that as part of gymnastics overall.
Yeah. And one piece that I think is really important and that I'm working on trying to hopefully educate the community on is the application of force and technical mechanics to sprinting on vault. Because I think I'm a huge believer that, the part that takes the most time on vault, which is the run, is really the reason why your vault is going to do what it does. Because I think we do train the technical side a lot, right, of the entry and stuff like that. But if you can't create enough power to get your vault to turn over or flip or have a block or anything like that, then, you're really doing all the hard work on the side that should be the easiest, right? The hard work should be building all the power and the speed. And then the easiest part should be hitting that board table and flying in the air, and then, the landings. And so kind of teaching that, which I think is important with Olympic lifting, because you have to really learn how to drive through the ground to get that weight up. It's not about jumping and throwing it. You're driving down to pull that thing up, and then you get under it, right? And so,
and then being able to settle in once it's over your head, right? And I think that also goes back to, like, gymnasts are super strong and don't use their cores properly. So I think that's a whole nother topic, where Olympic lifting, you have to engage that core at all times, because you get that weight overhead. I don't care how strong you are, your shoulders can't just be all the support that you have. It has to be all the way down from, from your neck all the way down through your toes. And so I do think that working core in those lifts is imperative.
Yep, and I agree. Well, that's kind of cool to talk about, because not many times, are able to really talk about those things and really have the understanding. But I hope that the education of that kind of starts, being dispersed to more people and more coaches and stuff like that, and really truly understanding, because again, these athletes are capable, and we can see it in how they do their skills, and they're capable of learning some of these things, and in club where they're going to be there for a while, it's good to introduce some of those things. What are some other passions that you have that you like to do outside of coaching? What makes you, and what gives you a break from the job that you do?
I think top of my list is spending time with friends. Just breaking off from work. And as much as I love my job, and I do spend an enormous amount of time, in doing what I do, but spending time with friends, I love to travel, yoga. So that's been kind of been put on the back burner lately, which is really, tough when that happens. But yeah, I think traveling is probably one of my top things that I just absolutely love. Prior to coming to Cornell, when I couldn't find a job right out of college, I was a flight attendant. So
Okay.
little known fact that is now obviously going to be a little more known fact. But it was really interesting going to new places, seeing, meeting new people. And so I think, when I retire, I will probably spend a whole lot more time traveling. As a kid, a lot of people didn't fly, back in the 70s and 80s, just whenever they felt like going somewhere. So I spent a lot of time in the car with my parents, putting miles on the car. Living in Florida, we would drive up to Lake Winnipesaukee up in New Hampshire. We had family up there. We drove out to the Grand Canyon, did a lot of camping, a lot of hiking. So that is definitely coming back into my future. I can see it as soon as I retire and I have more time to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, I love it. Off the top of your head, where's one place that you'd want to go once you retire?
New Zealand.
New Zealand. And why New Zealand?
I don't know. It's someplace I've always wanted to go. I had an amazing opportunity to go to Tahiti and Bora Bora with a bunch of friends, and that was amazing. I'd love to go back to Greece. I went there when I was 13 and feel like I need to do it as an adult.
Yeah.
I actually spent a little bit of time in Romania at that same time. Very interesting, I think, as a 13-year-old to see the countryside where they still had outhouses and, hand pumps for water. So I think, you get comfortable in the space that you're in. And really moving outside of that, I think is just key to becoming a better person, which should be, to me, a lifelong goal for everyone, to just make yourself a little bit better every single day. So I think, just expanding your knowledge of other people and other cultures and other places is just so important.
I agree. And which kind of segues into, I also noticed that you're part of, boards and stuff, at least with the community of, gymnastics, and being able to have that type of impact and kind of, sit on those boards or be directors or some of those things. Kind of what was your passion or vision or purpose in being on those, and kind of what do you want to see, happen with the sport of gymnastics as you sit, or sat in those roles and still do?
I think, the more you know, the more you know, and the more you can potentially help change the course of whatever, committee or organization that you sit on. And you may not be the loudest voice in the room, but sometimes having a quiet voice and being persistent is important. I think that, committee wise, in the past, I've been on committees that I felt, where maybe I could do some good quality work, and work in hand with some other coaches that I really respect and think have great ideas, and, helping to, whether it's my idea, their idea, whether, we collaborate to, move those forward. I think the NCAA landscape is constantly changing. I think in 3 to 5 years, it's not going to look at all like what it is right now. What will it look like? I don't even know, but I know that it's going to change significantly. And so, being a part of that, I think, is important, because I think all voices on all sides need to be heard. I think, we hear a lot about the Power 5 conferences, the schools with, who are always on TV, and not just in the gymnastics world, but I think just in general. The sports where the kids are getting all the NIL money, where it just the loudest voices, right, in the room. And I think what the voices that need to also be there, even if they're quiet voices, are the voices of the kids who are going to school because they want to get a great education and they love gymnastics and they're doing it. And I think that's one of the reasons I've stayed at Cornell is, every single person on my team could walk out the door tomorrow and not do gymnastics anymore, but not have to leave Cornell. Mm-hmm. We don't offer scholarships. So, they're here because they love the sport and because they want to be here. And I think fostering that feeling of being there because you just love it and not feeling the need to stay. So I think, the voices of those coaches also need to be heard, and making sure that, there are going to always be opportunities for people who want to do it just for the love of it. Yeah. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with scholarships. I was on a scholarship, and that's amazing. And for a lot of kids, that's how they can, get to college. But just creating a space where they feel safe to pursue their dreams academically, but also gymnastically. Yeah. So again, sitting on these, I don't do it because I want to boost my resume. I'm not going anywhere unless Cornell decides they want to fire me or something. But I think I do it so that I do know what's going on, and I do have a voice when I need to.
Yeah. No, I think it's wonderful, especially like you said, representing those who may not always get represented, and being the voice, that for them, because again, every person, every human being is valuable, and sometimes, as you said, there's more attention because resources are, they have more access to resources at certain universities, which is the reality of what it is, right? And sometimes with that, you get, more of the say, or you get more of the opportunities, more of the platforms to be able to kind of say how you feel, or get, to move the needle forward, right? Mm-hmm. Which I believe, like you said, I think, having those persistent voices who are going to help see changes, because again, not everybody is going to have the opportunities to be at some of those places, and with scholarships especially, and roster limitations, not everybody is going to be capable, which in the sport of gymnastics now, right, you kind of mentioned it's evolving. The Division III programs are competing for some of the same kids that would go to Division I programs as walk-ons. Absolutely. Or even get scholarships, because there's so many athletes that are doing a great job, and so many coaches are doing a wonderful job, developing these athletes and getting their skill level up, which there's not going to be a home for everyone to go. Right. Division I, Division II, but you get to go. I think,
the difference between Division I and Division III, that gap has been closing like exponentially. I think, what used to be the athlete at a Division III might be a level 8. And now the vast majority of those kids are level 10s. And the difference between, a full scholarship program and a Division III school is just depth. How many kids, can score a 985 or better, And what used to be maybe a Division III school had one kid, they now have 2 or 3 or 4 kids, maybe more on certain events, and I think it's the beauty of gymnastics. It's also the beast of gymnastics, right?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, but I think it's fantastic. I also think, kids choose a university because it speaks to them in some way.
Yeah.
And it may be that it's a huge school with a big football program, or maybe it's a small school with no football program, which for me, kind of going back to, my parents were Florida State grads. I went to a school that had no football team, so I didn't have to pick sides.
Yeah.
So I think, you pick a school for a reason, whether it's the campus or the coach or a combination of things. They have the major that you're looking for or whatever, but it's so incredibly important to find that school that really you feel you will be home. You will feel like it's home for 4 years, because, and I say this all the time, and I'm sure my whole team would just roll their eyes, but like, you have 4 years, this is it, right? You worked so hard to get to this point. Your last 4 years should be your best 4 years. They should be fun. They should be exciting. You should still be learning new things. But while you're doing all of that, you should be at a place where you feel comfortable and outside of the gym, because that is a large part of, why you're at college.
100%. And what about Ithaca? And for those who don't know where it is, can you kind of talk about where you guys are located, and then segue into the question about what about Ithaca makes it so special? Or and Cornell.
Interesting. Yeah. Cornell and Ithaca are interesting places. So the slogan is, Ithaca is 10 square miles surrounded by reality. So there's always that joke. But Ithaca is located in upstate New York, so kind of central New York. We're about 50 miles from Syracuse, southwest of Syracuse. We're only about a little over 4 hours from New York City. I think everybody thinks of New York and they automatically are like, oh, the city. We're about 4-ish hours from the city. It is surrounded, Cornell itself is surrounded by farms and rolling hills and lakes. We're right in the heart of the Finger Lakes region. And so everything here is absolutely beautiful. And they say it's gorgeous because there's about 100 waterfalls and gorges within a 10-mile radius of campus.
Oh, wow.
So it's definitely not in a city. But if you need city feel, you can hop on the campus to campus bus and get to New York City. And like I said, about 4 hours, give or take traffic.
Yeah.
The campus itself is very large. It was started in 1865, but it was the first land grant institution in New York State. And so I think that, it is one of the Ivy schools, but it is the largest of the Ivies. We've got I think we're up to something like 16,000 undergrads, but a total population of about 26,000. So, I mean, it's a fairly large university. And I think, it's, like I said, it's the biggest of the Ivies, population wise, and maybe even land wise. We have the vet school and the business school and the law school also on campus. Medical school and tech campus are in New York City, but the campus itself has botanic gardens and farms and we do a lot of crop management. So because it was a land grant institution, half of Cornell is state and half of it is private. Okay. So if you're a New York State resident, there are a couple of different colleges you can apply to at Cornell that are state universities.
Oh, wow.
Which I think a lot of people don't know, because all of the other Ivies are just fully private.
Okay.
So yeah, so a couple little nuggets that are just different, even though we're part of the Ivy League.
That's cool. Yeah, I've never really heard of a college being split like that.
Yep.
Which ones, are more public and which ones are more private?
So we now have 8 undergraduate colleges, and unlike some schools, you apply to one of the colleges at Cornell. But the state ones are the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, the College of Industrial and Labor Relations, and the College of Human Ecology. So those 3 are the main ones that are part of the state system.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does that are they all on that campus?
Yep.
And
Yep.
okay.
If you walked around, you wouldn't necessarily notice that there was like some delineation between them, other than once you're here, if you're an engineer, all of the engineering buildings are in this section of campus. And if you're in the College of Industrial and Labor Relations, they're in this part of campus. So the campus is sectioned off in that way, but if you're just walking around, you wouldn't know that.
Yeah. And now, how does it change tuition for students or student athletes when they come in? If they go to one of the ones that are a state school or state program, and then versus one that's a private, school within the Cornell,
Right.
kind
Yeah. So
of.
if you're a New York State resident and you apply to one of the state colleges, you would get in-state tuition.
Okay.
But if you're an in-state student and you apply to one of the non-state colleges, you would not get in-state tuition. It's
Okay.
part of the private part of Cornell.
Okay. And so if I was a in-state and I go into the private, I get in-state as well there, or just as if I came from anywhere?
Yeah, no, I think it's just you get in-state tuition if you go to one of the state colleges.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. How about someone who's from outside and they go to, they're still out of state?
Correct.
Okay.
So Cornell tuition is Cornell tuition unless you're an in-state student at one of
Okay.
those colleges.
Yeah. All right, cool. Sounds good.
And
And
then
on
I think tuition wise, all of the IVs have need-based financial aid. So I think, there's this misconception that we offer scholarships, but it's just based on your family income. And so they do offer grant money. All of the IVs offer grant money, depending obviously on your family income.
Okay. That's good to know. Very good to know. So a lot of the athletes that you guys have, when they go there, their, passion really is for, the school and the university and this, because I know a lot of times if you're really thinking, which is hard as athletes sometimes when you're going to pursue the next level um of sport, sometimes our priorities kind of get shifted, or we kind of get distracted because we think it's about the process of getting to that athletic program rather than the process of, okay, this is where I'm going to get my education, this is where I'm going to be living, this is the community I'm going to be with, and sometimes make a decision that's not ideal for us just because we're like, I'm so excited because like say Florida State, for example. Hey,
Sure.
I got an opportunity to go to Florida State. State is such a big school, it's well known, this and that. I want to be a Seminole. And then you get there and you're like, okay, maybe this is not where, because
Right.
and being able to make the decisions based off of the complete experience that you're going to have academically. Is it, do I want a big campus feel? Do I want big classes, or do I want smaller classes? Are my professors going to be more interactive, or are all my classes going to be on campus, or can I do some online? Is there the variety? What do they have to offer for international study abroad stuff and stuff like that, which I think is super important to consider. And then, finally, the financial piece, right? Which I'm glad that you touched on, the way that you could get some money and stuff like that. So then people can kind of know, what steps to initiate. Because again, if you come from a place where, family-based need is something that you could qualify for, it shouldn't limit your opportunity to go and say, hey, I want to go to an Ivy League and stuff like that, but also knowing that it may not always just be about academics only, which I think is important, and not saying that it isn't important, but you know, kind of knowing what you're getting into before you kind of get into it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we're looking at recruits for us, we have a very limited recruiting budget, which is fine. And we work well within, what we do have. But I think even if I don't want to say we had an unlimited budget, but even if we had a larger budget, I'm not sure how much I would get excited. I know so many coaches go to gyms and they watch and they go to people's houses and all of that. I think the best part for us is to bring them here to campus, because it is such a different campus than many others. Have them meet the team, because again, you're going to be spending a lot of time with all of these people, and you want to enjoy the people that you're going to be spending the bulk of your time with. So bringing them to campus, walking them around, having them go to a class, watch practice, meet me and my assistant, meet some of our faculty that are here, talk to our team faculty advisor. So I think, for us, the best place is to have them here.
Yeah.
To show them what Cornell has to offer. I can talk a blue streak if I'm sitting in your living room, how great Cornell is, but maybe you're from a small area or a rural area and you're like, oh, I love Cornell. And you get to Cornell and you're like, this is another rural area. I want to go to school in a city.
Yeah.
I don't want to sell Cornell on something that it isn't.
Yeah.
Right? Or vice versa. A kid lives in a city and is like, I'm sick of the city. I want to go somewhere that's not that. Right.
Yeah.
But I think until you actually walk, step foot on a campus, you don't really know what that feels like or how you feel in that space. And I think it's key to have kids come to your campus and see what it's all about. Not put on any special pretenses, not, any of that. But just, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And we love it here for, all of these different reasons. But then you as an athlete, if you're coming here, are you going to love it?
Yep.
And what does that look like for you?
Agreed. No, and I think that's really important. Like you said, even with this, what I'm doing, we're just having the conversation about it and kind of giving some initial steps, right? Because for the most part, you don't go, and it's not similar to like a store, right? Where you can just go into a store and be like, hey, I see this product and I want to buy it because I can see it right away. Where, it's like a commercial. You get to hear about it first, which what we're doing is we're, kind of talking about it first. But I also want to, come on campus and do these things live on different campuses. And so people have a sense of what it may look like so they can put themselves there. And then it could entice them to go and do it themselves and be like, okay, I have an idea of what it may already be like. So I want to go and understand that for myself, right? I can envision it in my head. And now I can really be like, what I envisioned is what I really feel once I get here.
Yep.
And so super excited about, obviously this time and process and stuff like that. And I want to kind of get into now talking about the gymnastics itself. So you mentioned you have another coach. So who's your other coach and what is your roles on the in the program? Do one of you coach 2 events? Do you guys kind of share all the events? And then is recruiting kind of a split duty, or does one kind of handle more of the recruiting than the other?
Sure. There's 2 of us. So myself and then Mike Brackman. He was a gymnast in Chicago and did college gymnastics there as well. And then he was at a gym in Chicago before he came to Cornell. So this is his 3rd year. That I think for me was a really hard transition. Paul retired. And so I moved into the head coaching role. And after working with the same person for 27 years, it's a little daunting to be like, okay, I'm going to bring a new person in and what is that going to look like? But Mike has been absolutely amazing. I think that he's got great technical knowledge as a coach. We mostly split the events. So he kind of stations himself on the bar end of the gym. Again, even though he's a gymnast, he's 6'2". So just like Paul, tall guy, little easier to reach up to that high bar and whatnot. And I station myself on the beam end of things. And then it just depends on each kid. Some kids only want him to spot. Some kids only want me to spot. But we try and share as many of those duties as we can. And then, we have a pit. It's an above ground pit, but it's all 4 events go into it. Because we're on the 2nd floor of our building. But from up there, you can kind of get a feeling of all the things that are happening. So with 27 on the team, it can be tricky to have eyes on everybody, but we're fortunate we have cameras where we can do instant replay. And, so if we didn't happen to see it, we'll go over and, watch the video with somebody if they want us to look at something that we didn't get to see on, the first go round. We have great, setup in our gym. So I feel like, whether one of us is actually at an event or not, the girls have the opportunity to do things that are safe in a pit, if needed, a loose foam pit if needed. So as far as recruiting goes, he loves recruiting, which is awesome. I love meeting new people. It kind of goes back to just always interesting to meet new people, see where they're from and whatnot. But the actual act of recruiting is probably, I don't want to say it's the least favorite part of my job, because really paperwork and all that is my least favorite part. But the recruiting, there's just so many kids and so many kids that I really like you get to know these kids and you're in awe, right? Because they're just awesome. Some of the things outside of the gym that they're doing, some of the things, obviously within the gym that they're doing, but they're just good people.
Right.
And that's one of the things, I would say that's top of our list is we want to recruit really good people.
Yeah.
You could be an amazing gymnast, and if you're not really a nice person, I'm not sure that, we would really want to have you on our team. But he loves like the nitty gritty details. Like he'll watch a kid once and then we'll be talking about recruits and he'll be like, oh yeah, she does this and this. I'm like, how do you remember these things? He just has this like knack for like remembering what people do. And I think it's awesome. I'll go back and watch the film, however many times I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. So we play off each other really well in that respect. But, recruiting wise, we try to split it up. I think it goes back to kind of how Paul and I used to divvy things up. And I feel it's really important, and Mike and I talk about this a lot. Like, what if, I don't want this to happen, but what if I was in a car accident tomorrow and I couldn't be in the gym? What does he need to know? What things that I would normally handle, if he doesn't know about them, he can't handle them. So I feel like it's really important. Yes, he's an assistant coach. Yes, he's only been here for 3 years, but the more he knows, the better he can serve our team, regardless of whether I am there or not. What if I had a family emergency? What if, or vice versa, right? Like, I feel like our roles need to be very intertwined, but also could be very separate if they have to be.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I think that's really good how you mentioned that, because I think sometimes we kind of get isolated in our positions and our roles, and we, try to get really good at that. But as you said, knowing what your other person is doing, in other sports that are like more team sports, sometimes you can kind of learn that concept because it helps what you do and helps the flow of things, right? But in gymnastics, since a lot of times it's more individual, and really what you do doesn't necessarily have to impact somebody else. It does in regards to fears, right? Because a lot of times it seems like fears are contagious, but when it comes to like directly, the way I do my bar routine doesn't have to affect the way you do your bar routine, right? Or it's going to mess you up, right? But in what you're saying, sharing roles, and if something happens, or if someone needs to, they're just sick one day, or again, they're out recruiting, or, just come in and, take care of things, but also passing the torch. There's going to be a day where you want to travel and retire, and, and say that he wants to stay in it and he gets the opportunity to. It just helps make that process so much smoother.
And I think, if you're not learning from other people, you're just stagnant. And that to me is not okay. And I think Mike has a lot of really good ideas and really good insight to impart. And if I'm not learning from him and he's not learning from me, then I think, our team can't grow. So I think it's important that we both are bringing new things to the table, and that we're listening and, being active in, collaborating on a regular basis.
Yeah. And do you guys do that with your team? Like, do you guys have captains, or do you guys have a leadership committee? And when you have your captains, are they captains that are mostly upperclassmen, or is it where the coaches vote on them or the athletes vote on them? Kind of what is that process?
So I think we like to give our team a lot of autonomy. I think that, it's our experience, but it's their experience, right? And we're just guiding them to where they want to get to. We have 3 team captains, and we have 1 senior and 2 juniors, and the team votes on them. So at the end of this year, they'll vote on team captains for next year. They're 3 very different personalities, and I think it's actually great because what one's strengths are maybe the weakness for somebody else, and so they play off each other really well. And I think they each bring something very unique to the table. And so I feel like, with a large program, and a lot of people on the team, I think it's really important to have many voices, not too many, but many voices to be the leaders, and to kind of impart what the team sentiment is. And having just one captain, I think, is really difficult to do that with a large team. So they're fantastic. Our doors are always open. I think that's the one thing we really work on, making sure it's open communication. If we feel like that's shutting down, we'll sit down with the whole team and have a talk about, remember, if something comes up, if you have an issue and you need help, there's 2 coaches and 3 captains, and then everybody else. And if you don't feel comfortable bringing it to one of your coaches or one of your captains, somebody else will feel comfortable. So just talk to them, and then they can move forward. I think, the open communication thing is just absolutely imperative. And really listening to what they're saying, because the workload here is incredibly heavy. Most of our kids are pre-med, engineering, go down the list. They're pretty heavy duty majors. And so, if you're having a day, there'll be days somebody will walk in the gym and you just, by the look on their face, you'll be like, oh, glad you're here. How about you go home and take a nap? How about you go get a coffee and just go decompress, right? So just knowing the team, knowing their needs, really listening to what they have to say and what they want to bring to the table and what they want the team to look like in any given year, is just really super important for us.
No, I agree. And what are some pillars that you stand on for your team and your program? What are things that you in regards to like your coaching style and kind of your expectations for your program?
So our expectation is that people are going to come in and work hard, and that while every day may not be your best day, you're putting forth your best effort on that particular day. And, I think gymnastics it's not always about winning and losing. You can have your very best day ever. Everybody can have their best score ever, and you can still not win a meet. And I think when you only focus on the wins and losses, there's a whole subset of things that you're not focusing on that are, in my opinion, a lot more important, right? We hit 24 for 24. Everybody stuck a landing. 3 people did new skills and caught them or landed them or whatever it was. So I think focusing on the things that we can actually control, that are within our control, is what we really focus on. But I think, honesty is key, regardless whether it's, in your personal life, in your gymnastics life, wherever. So I think honesty is probably really high up there for us. Communication, and then supporting each other, I think, are probably my top 3 for the team, because I feel like if you're not doing those things, we will not be successful. Doesn't matter how good of an athlete you are.
No, I agree. I think those are essential, and those are life lessons that they're going to take outside of just the sport, and that they're going to become better people, to be better participants in society, and to influence the places that they're going to have influence over, like their jobs or their families and stuff like that.
Right.
And where do you guys compete? Do you guys compete in-house, or like do you have an
Yeah.
in-house place that you guys compete?
Um, up until 2019, we were mostly, for the most part, competing in our practice gym.
Okay.
We had a gift from a donor to add an extra set of equipment. So we now compete in our field house. So we're kind of where our basketball team plays. And we have a whole set of equipment, all the mats, all the extraneous, whatever we need. We have an amazing crew that sets up for us. And it's a great venue. We just added a brand new scoreboard in there that's, big, HD, whatever,
Yeah.
scoreboard, all the interactive things. So we're up there permanently now. It used to be just if we were hosting a big meet, we were up there, but now we're up there full time.
Nice. And then what conference are you guys in?
We're in the GEC, which is a new conference. It's an independent conference. All of the schools that are in the GEC used to be in the ECAC. And we felt like that organization wasn't really serving our needs. And so ECAC hockey is amazing, but ECAC for some other sports isn't quite as extensive. And so we felt that breaking off and making an independent conference would serve our needs better. So there are 8 schools in the conference, 4 Ivies and 4 others. And they're all pretty similar in ability, which is awesome. It always makes for a super, super intense competition. So
yeah,
yeah.
very good. Very good. And what's the environment like at a competition, a Cornell gymnastics meet, a home meet?
Oh, we have a lot of athletes in the stands. I think it's an interesting place to get to.
Okay.
So you're flying to Syracuse and driving, or it's not, our alums are constantly being like, we want to come to Ithaca, but it's such a trek to get there. So we do have a decent fan base. We're not, 20,000 selling out an arena, but we have a loyal fan base, and our alums are super supportive, and we're on ESPN Plus. So, for those who can't get here, they're watching on the TV or on their computer. And I would say, Cornell has, like I said, about 16,000 undergrads, but about 1,200 of them are athletes. So almost 10% of our undergraduate students are varsity athletes, and they're all very supportive of each other. So, we go to other teams' events, they come to our events. And then you have a local crowd, and depending on who the meet is against, we usually will draw, their fans and their families into our stands.
That's good. And do you have a relationship with Ithaca, like the college, the other Division III program? Because are you guys in the same town?
We're about 5-minute drive apart.
Very
So
cool.
so kind of going back to Ithaca is an interesting place because you've got 2 big colleges, and Ithaca is a town of about 30,000 residents. But when you add in Cornell and Ithaca College, it more than doubles the population when school's in session. The county is about 120,000 in the county, but Ithaca proper, the town itself, is only about 30,000. So when school is in session, traffic around here is terrible.
Oh man, I can imagine. And is there a lot of split fan bases like between Cornell and Ithaca, just because of, the proximity of the universities, but also the size?
I think the town is pretty supportive of both universities, as far as fans go. So, if you love basketball, you're probably going to both schools to watch. And so I don't think it's too terribly split. We're also, because they're Division III and we're Division I, we see a lot of different schools, who we compete with, although we do compete with them. But just generically in most sports, they're bringing in different schools. So there's not a whole lot of crossover in that respect. But what I will say, we now have 6 schools in New York with gymnastics, which is amazing. With the addition of LIU a couple years ago, and this year Utica, We now have 6. And so we decided, all 6 of us decided that we're going to have once a year, we're going to do the Empire State Collegiate Championship, and we'll rotate that around. It should be a super fun meet. We're hosting it for the first year this year.
Love it.
LIU next year, and then kind of, rotate around after that. But yeah, super exciting. And, with the NCAA not recognizing division in gymnastics, it doesn't matter who you compete with, as long as we all follow the same rules. So we'll see Ithaca, Cortland, Brockport, and now Utica. We'll see them all almost every year, at least once.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned earlier that you guys don't have scholarships, correct?
Correct.
But you guys are a Division I program.
Correct.
So how does that work for especially people who have the assumption that, hey, Division I programs have scholarships, and how do you guys navigate that through the recruiting process and when you're talking to parents and coaches and
we're just
athletes?
We're very upfront from the beginning. So as soon as a kid reaches out to us, our initial email back to them is, here's what Cornell is all about, some just general information about, we have multiple colleges and you apply to one of those colleges. We also have only need-based financial aid. We don't offer scholarships of any kind, and that includes academic. So, we have had kids who've had scholarship money, but it maybe it was from their church. Or we had a kid from California one time, and her high school awarded scholarship money to the top male and female athlete at their high school with the best GPA. So she had a scholarship, but it was not from Cornell. Yeah. But we have to have that conversation up front, because it is not inexpensive to come to school here. And for a lot of families, it is a big struggle. But we do have them on Cornell's financial aid website. There's a financial aid calculator, and we encourage them to go to that website and put in their information, and it'll give them an idea. Oh, you may get a $30,000 grant, right? And then that lowers the cost of your tuition and whatnot. And then maybe that's more reasonable for a family to be able to afford. Yeah. But it is, that's probably one of the top conversations that we have with almost every recruit, is the financial aid piece. Yeah.
And what is your guys' mascot and war cry?
Oh, you gotta love the Ivy Leagues. So if Cornell is the Big Red, okay, right? That is our thing. Yeah. We do have a bear as our spirit mark. I don't know what else you want to call it. Yeah. There is a story behind the bear, but we are not the Cornell Bears. We are the Cornell Big Red. So the story behind the bear is, at one point, somebody had rescued a baby bear, and then they put it on a leash and brought it to a football game, and somehow that became a mascot. Clearly the bear got bigger, in which case you had to do something with it. But war cry, it's officially unofficial, yell Cornell. Okay. And that's been around since the 20s. And there's nowhere where it says Cornell's official war cry or battle cry or whatever you want to call it is this, but it's in many different publications and whatnot. And so they've kind of revised that and revamped it. And so it's become a hashtag, so it's, hashtag yell Cornell.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah. Well, I appreciate having you on the podcast. Do you have anything you want to leave with the listeners and the viewers, kind of, to leave them with in regards to Cornell University, kind of why someone would want to choose Cornell, and why you're excited to still be at Cornell?
Wow. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on. This has been great. I think, Cornell definitely has a lot to offer, obviously academically. But I think it's the family atmosphere that we really focus on. And we feel like every person that comes through our program is a part of our family, and we treat them as such. And we just love what we do. And I think Not that other coaches don't, but I think finding the right program, finding the right feel, visiting campuses, seeing what that looks like and what it could be,
Right.
is really the key to everything. And so taking your time to explore all of your options and not, making too hasty of a decision before you've really explored all of your options. So I think that's what I would say. And Cornell's beautiful. So parents love coming here. They love visiting their kids here because there's so much to do, especially if you're an outdoors person. But yeah, Cornell's awesome, but really college gymnastics, if this is what you want to do your homework, take some visits, and then see which one feels like it's home for you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Heated Conversations. And thank you, Melanie, for joining the podcast and talking about Cornell. And also answering some questions that some people may have had, especially in regards to Ivy Leagues and how it works on a financial piece, but also reiterating the process of going to a campus and really getting the full experience of being there and know that it's for you. And it's not always just about what you hear, it's doing your initial research, but also going there and having that experience for yourself. I hope you got a lot of insightful information. Tune into the next one. Remember to subscribe, to like, share, and comment. See you guys on the next one.